Hey, NL-110, this is Ensign Santana with Commander Norton and Lieutenant Commander Santiago. We're wrapping up the Fundamentals of Personhood module in our class. And this lesson is meant to give a pause to consider how everything you have learned so far can be incorporated holistically and applied to your life at the Naval Academy. Commander, what is an area that we can focus on to begin?
Hey, Juan, it's great to be back with you. I think one area we can start with is culture and socialization. I remember you and I discussed that a couple weeks ago. And, with culture, the norms, both formal and informal, and then the socialization being how those get translated from one group of people in the culture to the newcomers. I know there's a Midshipmen Affairs team actually that has been exploring the culture within the brigade right now. Lieutenant Commander Santiago, could you explain exactly what the MAT is and maybe offer an example to highlight the different norms, both informal and formal, and also socialization at the Naval Academy?
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me. So the Midshipmen Affairs team is a multidisciplinary team from across the yard that collaborates to help support midshipmen in their moral, mental, and physical mission. We want to support the excellence of midshipmen. And so one of the things that the MAT did was create a culture survey that was given to the midshipmen. And we've been working with that feedback from your fellow midshipmen and figuring out ways that we can help support midshipmen better. So one of those concerns that was listed on that survey was that alcohol is often used as a stress reliever, and there's a big binge drinking culture here. And so you get socialized into that right from the beginning. I know I was talking to the plebes in my classes, and the first weekend out on Liberty wasn't that long ago. And so they saw these upper class that they respect so much coming back inebriated, even though alcohol wasn't allowed technically on that Liberty session. And so it's just showing you right from the get-go that the work hard, play hard means you work hard and then you drink a lot to try to forget it. And it's really something that you have to ask yourself at this point in your military career, you want to be a part of this.
Yeah, that is such a great point. The whole exploring the culture of the brigade, it reminds me, previously, before I came back here as an instructor, I'd gone to graduate school, and part of that was doing some research. So I came to the Naval Academy in 2015, not too long ago, with a team of civilian researchers. And I was even dressed in civilian clothes myself. I was rocking a goatee. And we asked the midshipmen questions, right? And they were very honest, both about the good and bad things that were happening at the Naval Academy. One of the things that jumped right out at me was just the vast number of subcultures that do exist. I know I mentioned that previously in the culture lesson, but really just the different teams, the clubs, the ECAs, the 30 different companies here. There's just so many of them. Ensign Santana, do you remember that when we were talking about the different subcultures during the culture lesson?
Yes, sir, I do actually. And there's also a big divide in, the NARPs and the midshipmen athletes. And there's a big mistake in the mentality of a lot of midshipmen that I personally was, exposed to, that is my way is the right way or there's no other way of doing things. And that mentality can really affect how we view things, especially when you have those athletic midshipmen who have both to be on the field and be a midshipman in their companies. And the NARPs usually can see, oh, well, they're not here, so, they're not really part of the company, when they're actually just as important as anybody else in that company. And, everybody might not have the same view that I do, but it's just a matter of fact of just taking things into perspective and understanding that there's multiple ways of accomplishing one mission. Lieutenant Commander Santiago, is there anything that the Midshipmen Affairs team has heard that may contribute to this type of attitude at the Academy, ma'am?
Yes, thanks for asking. There actually is. So there's a perceived quota, and whether that quota might be for athletes or that quota might be on ethnicity or perhaps gender lines, there's still this perception that some midshipmen haven't necessarily had to meet the same standards to be here. And I had the opportunity to serve on the admissions board in 2012 and 2013. And I can tell you that all of the professors on the admissions board are very active in making sure that all of the midshipmen exceed the minimum requirements to be midshipmen here. But this fact that people think there is a quota it is something that causes a lot of division. And the admissions board, we do not have quotas at all. We do celebrate diversity of experience, though, and we want to make sure that people from diverse backgrounds, whether that's a kid who's lived in 7 different countries or another person who had to raise 3 siblings practically on their own because a parent was sick, that kind of thing is something that's really important to the brigade, so that we have these additional points of view, so that we have these additional diverse perspectives, which we'll talk about more in critical thinking. And that's just one of the many things that Matt is focusing on.
Lieutenant Commander Santiago, we have time for one more if you like.
Absolutely. So another important area that we could focus on is this bro culture that is pervasive in some aspects of the Naval Academy here. And you could even call it a counterculture, because it does deliberately oppose the culture of dignity and respect that we try to cultivate here. So this bro culture, when I'm talking about it, I'm talking about things like the locker room talk, or perhaps some inappropriate physical touching or making sexual comments that can, drive a wedge between certain groups at the Naval Academy. Sometimes, that's the predominantly male environment that this happens in can make a female feel less than, or that the female's perspective isn't being heard. And last week we talked about socialization. So those of you who saw that Pearl video, right, you see how easy it is to be socialized into a culture that you didn't necessarily agree with in the beginning. And sometimes it takes a wake-up call to get you to realize that culture that you've socialized in isn't furthering dignity and respect among our midshipmen. So in our first shape session, we talked about how much words matter. And it's something that you need to engage your system too on. And are the words that I am saying, what kind of impact do the words that I'm saying have on the person who's hearing them? Commander Norton, did you have anything to add?
I think of one thing, but first, let me just say that I really agree with that point you just made about System 2 and the deliberate thought that it takes. As far as culture change goes, it takes time, right? It's not a quick thing, and that can be frustrating. One of the theories that I always like to reference with respect to culture change has 3 different parts. The first thing is that we have to be uncomfortable with what's going on around us. If we're not, we slip back into that System 1 automatic nature and we don't do anything about it. Now, as soon as we're uncomfortable, we have to realize that what's going on is going against some goal that we have. Hopefully, we can all agree at this point, back to your example that you were giving, we want a culture of dignity and respect in the brigade. So if that's a goal and we see something that's happening that's against that, that's in the favor of wanting to change the culture. I know the Secretary of the Navy just recently released guidance on this, saying that this is not what we're about as a military, as a Navy, certainly not as the brigade. And we've heard that same story from hopefully all of our leaders, right? This third part, I think, is the most important. So as we're having these discussions, like you said, the shape session and others, we have to give ourselves the psychological safety to have them. We can't go into these discussions with judgment about one side or the other. We have to let both sides or multiple sides say how they truly feel and be ready not to judge, be ready to listen. Because when that psychological safety is given, that's when you actually have a meaningful discussion. A one-time brief or training is going to address behavior, and that might change behavior in the short term. But when you have those discussions with the psychological safety, that's going to address the underlying attitudes. And that's what it takes to change culture over time.
Well, everyone, that is all we have time for today. Commander Norton and Lieutenant Commander Santiago, thank you guys for your insights into how we can apply these concepts from the fundamentals of personhood module to the USNA and how it can make the brigade a better place.